And one of the things that's interesting is like if you've had a very vivid dream, sometimes your brain does not know the distinction between what was reality and what was dream. It's like this momentary period of like what just happened and what's going on.
I believe that everything that we really need is already in front of us. But that thing in front of you is not even going to help you until you really decide that it's going to help you, that you are going to tap into it. Everything that can be is already is, but is in a potential sense. It is you that is going to transform them from their potential state to their real state, so that you don't have a limit. The limit that you have is the one that you set.
As you're telling the stories through hypnosis, it's an indirect way, because like if you're telling somebody that you need to do this, they may resist that. They may not want to participate in that journey. They may have every reason why they're unhappy or upset or failing at their job. But if you tell a story about somebody that, they were really unhappy at their job or unhappy in their relationship, and they went out and they were at the grocery store and they just realized that they saw somebody smile and they realized, wow, that smile is really the magic of life. I started off as an engineer. My name is Steven Buescher, and the journey in life is something that sometimes we're not aware of. And that was my path. I was trying to make sense of everything and trying to be successful. And I didn't realize it's not until you just embrace, everything about life and intentionally realize that what you think about and what you focus on dictates the quality of your life. So if you're looking for success, if you're looking for a romance or relationships or connection with other people, the first thing that we can do is realize that what we create within ourselves is what we'll attract from externally. So it's stepping into that space where you might be a little bit uncomfortable and realize that everything that we do over and over again, we'll get better at. So find something that you love and do it.
You're right. That is powerful. That is powerful. You are putting the power back in the hands of the people now, and that can be really very, very interesting. But let's spend some time about you, Steven. So, what do you remember about your childhood? Help us to understand that.
So, everybody has different focuses on their childhood. And it's interesting because from our childhood memories, we'll have one or two specific memories that will define and dictate the rest of our lives. And our stories, the stories that we tell ourselves, are based on that childhood foundation. Sometime along, we will have a belief. That belief may belong to somebody else. It may come from a parent. It may come from a friend or a teacher. But the thing that's interesting is that belief is something that we will adopt and carry, and that becomes the foundation for our story. And how many times is that story that, we're not lovable, or we're not good enough, or we have to do something to be loved, right? That's why many people are successful in this world, is because they're trying to prove that they have worth. So this childhood story that we carry forward is something of power. For myself, I had a pretty good childhood, but there's a lot of conflict with my brothers, but we grew up on a farm. I was small, and it was that journey. Sometimes we didn't have the connection with our parents that we wanted to have. We didn't have the conversation. But again, that goes back into each one of us. That's how we learn. That's how we grow.
That's perfect. That's perfect. That makes us who we are. Life is not just a straightforward thing. It will pass through experiences, and those experiences shape who we become at the end of the day. All right. Now, how did you start into what you are doing today? How did you get into what you are doing today? What are those things that actually led you to the direction that you pick in life? Because you could have done many other things, no?
So it's interesting. I became an electrical engineer, but I became an electrical engineer because I loved computers, but I had a brother that passed away when I was younger, and he was an electrical engineer at Notre Dame and in the nuclear science program at.
Sorry about that.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, and it hit me hard. And so he was in the nuclear propulsion program in Orlando with the Navy. And when all of that happened, we all deal with grief differently. And so I carried this, this banner forward. He's my favorite brother. His name was Brian. And I became an electrical engineer because he was an electrical engineer, right? It's not really something that I wanted to do, but it the interesting thing is that subconsciously I was trying to honor his spirit and do something, to remember him or to be part of that. And what happens is we go through life, and so I had my own technical services business, and I was successful, but not wildly successful. And then life happened to me, right? It's like I was in a relationship that started having some of those toxic red flags of gaslighting, of constant being under stress, or into an insecure state of fear, of not knowing whether you're going to walk into to chaos, or walking into an argument, or walking into just peace. You didn't know what you're going to get. And when all of that happened, some big things changed in my life, and I got to the point where I started thinking catastrophically, because this person had said that they were going to get me out of the house in 30 days. We'd been together for 20 years. And then she said some other things, and she had been lying for so long that I didn't know what was going to be said. So my mind got into this loop of catastrophic thinking, like, oh my gosh, I remember her saying something about the Me Too movement, and that she could use this anytime she wanted to have an outcome. And it scared the hell out of me. And I thought, okay, my life's over. How can I protect myself? So I ended up telling her that I can't be in the house with her, and that I didn't even feel safe in the same city. So I went, an hour away, so that I'd have a paper trail of everything for like the next month to try to figure this out. Because my head was still spinning. I didn't understand what was, how do you process all this? How do you deal with it? And so in that time, it was just a short amount of time, but your thoughts wrap up. And I realized that it was my own thoughts that were trapping me. It was my own thoughts, because we do that to ourselves. We think in a way that creates an emotion, and that emotion then kicks in and creates another thought. And when it was all said and done, it was my own thoughts that were trapping me, right? And it was also my own thoughts that kept me in a relationship where I wasn't being appreciated. And this is the same thing that happens within a workplace. We don't feel like we're good enough, or we feel like we're trapped with either money or finances. This is why people get stuck in situations where it's not healthy, because you're not thriving. And what I found out is that the worst place to be in life is where you're in tolerable misery, where you're not happy. You're just on that edge of misery, but it's not bad enough that you're going to do something about it. And you can stay in tolerable misery for the rest of your life. And it's a horrible place to be, because you are miserable. What came to me from this is that our thoughts dictate the quality of our life. And so when I was trying to figure out how could I be in a relationship where all of these things happened and I put up with it, in work, at home, all of these things, I realized that I had this belief about myself, about my personal worth, about what I was expecting in life. And the moment that I realized that it was my own belief, because I did do a scan, I said, okay, I'm not worthy, or I'm not lovable, was kind of this underlying theme. And it's like, where did this belief come from? And when I realized that it wasn't coming from a parent or a teacher or somebody else, I realized that I adopted this belief myself. Then I realized that I could change it. So I went from the engineering world, where I was trying to make sense of why, and this is something that was quite interesting, because I realized I had a lot of growth to do, and it's something that when I switched, it allowed that growth to happen. But I moved from this place of being cognitive, very left-brained, to moving over more into the right brain and trying to just say, you know what, I just want to be happy, and I'm going to make a commitment to being in this place, even though I don't know what that means at the moment. And so over the next 2 years, things slowly started changing. And so I moved into the space of realizing that our thoughts dictate the quality of our life, and that I wanted to find a tool that could help people with that. And that tool that I found was hypnotherapy. It's something that I had done when I was younger. the form of self-hypnosis. I had a childhood memory of that, where some people came to the house. They were psychologists and some priests and different people that were there, and they were talking about having a better life, and they talked about hypnosis as part of that. And I was only like 7 years old, but that gave me an exposure to it at a young age. And then experiencing this in my 20s for sleep therapy at the University of Cincinnati was really good. And then when I finally found out, it's like, how do you help people with their beliefs? I turned back to hypnotherapy and said, you know what, this is a really powerful tool. It's a good tool, and it can help a lot of people. So that's where I went to. So now I went back and got certification in hypnotherapy and life coaching, and I decided let's work on fixing the problems of people rather than fixing the problems of technology.
Thank you so much for that. I don't remember who said it. I don't remember. Let me try to frame it like this. Somebody was saying something to the effect that we essentially live to solve the problem of people, and as we are solving the problem of other people, our problem becomes solved also. Because life is not, if we turn the attention only on ourselves, we will literally hit our head on the ground. Because you'll be looking at it, then you will eventually hit your head on the ground. But if you are looking at other people, maybe like, even in the sense of literally try to lift them up, you see that naturally you will first have to lift yourself up first, because you want to lift people up. So I think what we learn in all of this is that it is good to help other people, to serve other people. And yet Muhammad Ali did say that the service we render to other people is the rent we pay in life, or the rent we pay living on earth. So yes, I really appreciate that you decide to help people, helping them to solve their problem. And I can be very sure that you are satisfied with that. Can you confirm that?
I'm very satisfied, because when I feel like it's something in alignment with my purpose, and how you can tell when you're in alignment with your purpose is that it doesn't drain you. It doesn't take away from the energy that you have, and that's important, because you can spend the same amount of time if you're doing something that you love and something that you despise. But it's the energy that you carry forward from that. It's like, this life is precious. It's absolutely precious. Every breath that we take is precious. It's beyond measure. I always tell people, if you want to find out what you want to do, start with this first little exercise. It's like, and it's this idea that if I would give you $1 million, would you take it? And usually people will say, well, what's the catch, right? What do I have to do? But no catch, right? You're moving past that. So they say, yeah, thank you. And then 10 million, 100 million. And every time it's like, yes, that would be amazing. And they could start thinking and imagining of the things that they would do with that, how it changed their life. But what if I gave you $1 trillion or $1 billion? But the condition is you have to spend it in this day. You can't transfer it to anybody else, but you won't wake up in the morning. I have yet to find anybody that would say yes to that. And what that tells you is that every moment, every breath is priceless. It's beyond any amount of money that somebody would give you. So what is it that we want to do with this time? And if we can grasp that concept, it can kind of wake us up into realizing that, what? Life is good. It doesn't matter whether you're struggling at the moment or whether you're in full abundance. It's this idea that you're living. And it's like, what do you want to do with this gift? What do you want to do with this moment that you have? If you can connect to that energy of gratitude, then that is the seed of happiness, and you will wake up in a better space.
That's so good. I love that. I love that. It sort of reminded me a guest I was interviewing here it should be a couple of years ago now, and he was saying something to the effect that this life we are living in is heaven. Don't make it hell. This is heaven. Make it the best that you can make it, no? And of course, it's also talking in relation with how you deal with people, because your satisfaction is going to come from what you do that help other people.
Yeah, it's funny because I say the opposite thing. I say this life is hell, but let's get so happy that the devil kicks us out.
You see?
You get happiness is contagious, and once you become happy, once you have that joy, then it's contagious, and it's like you're not going to be allowed to stay too long in hell if you're content, right?
All right. Thank you. That's interesting. Also, your point of view. That is very interesting. All right. Now, let's look at hypnosis. Because now we're going to look at how we apply hypnosis in storytelling. But first, let's look at hypnosis. What does it mean? What are we talking about by hypnosis?
So hypnosis, the one thing that Rob McNeely talks about, and he's a person that studied with Milton Erickson. Milton Erickson is a very well-known person in psychology that brought hypnotherapy into the mainstream, skilled helping profession, into the psychotherapy of the world. And the one thing that's agreed upon, because no one really knows what hypnosis is, but what they agree upon is that it includes where you're highly focused and you're absorbed in what it is that you're doing. So they talk about this state of trance, and it's this. Some of the symptoms is time dilation, like time will go by very quickly. So you can think of times when you were really enjoying something, and the time just it changed. It's like it went faster for you when you were enjoying it, and sometimes when there's something significant goes on. I can remember a car accident that time nearly stopped. Right, I could see millisecond by millisecond the cars lining up next to me, what was going to happen, to predict out my path and to move my car in a place where nothing else hit me. So it's a way of our brain to respond that not only helps us, but it's taking care of all of those tasks in the background. So one of the terms that you hear is subconscious. It's this part of our brain that is working in the background, taking care of everything. Like if I'm here to turn on a light switch, right? If I'm going to reach up and flip a switch, there are thousands and thousands of muscles involved with this, with the coordination between the eyes and my hand movement, and we have no consciousness of all of those interactions. But over time, we've learned to do this in our this underlying part of our brain has all of those programs and methods that can allow us to come in and flip that switch. Well, hypnosis is a similar thing, which is it's when we get into a state of being highly focused and absorbed. Sometimes we can open up that doorway to those base programs, and we can say, okay, what's helpful to us and what's not? What stories do we have in there that are real, and what are the imaginary monsters under the bed, right? And a lot of times it's what's helpful to us, because according to Erickson and according to a lot of the people, all of the solutions to every problem, and we talked about problems earlier, all of the solutions to the problems lie within us, and that ability to find the solution is something that we have. It's just this creative this spark that we have is how do you open up the access to that answer? And if we can do that, I love a problem, because if you know there's a problem, then you can understand the problem. If you understand the problem, then you can solve it. The worst problems are the ones that you don't know about.
All right. Now, the state of hypnosis, you said. But how do you get into that state? Is this something of a voluntary act, or is this something that you get by accident or something like that? Do you?
No.
Yeah, help me, please.
I was going to say, no one can be hypnotized against their will, right? You can be led down a path with repetition over and over and over again, and be taught to believe something that is not true. But you have to be a willing participant in that journey. At any moment, you can recognize that you have the power and that you can step out of that. And that's kind of the misconception that people have, is they've been fed this false story that they do not have the power that they have. And it happens over time. And so you end up getting trained into this state of being where you don't recognize just this amazing ability we have of regulating our own emotions, of creating the very thing that we're seeking, and that we don't need that from somebody else. Like we can create the very things that we seek to create. And I don't know why that secret's been hidden. That part of it's just this journey of development in life. But I always tell everybody, like, if you want to exit this state of hypnosis, right, because you're in complete control, just open your eyes. And the first few times the clients did that to me, it's like it surprised me, and it's like, well, I just went along with it. And when they shut their eyes again, they drop deeper into a state of hypnosis, and it was voluntary. It's a place that they went to. And what's interesting about hypnosis is you have the ability, because you are experiencing it in your mind, that you are in full control. Here's kind of an example of it. If I were to talk about a lemon, all right? So I'm going to just imagine having a lemon in your hand. Have you ever eaten a lemon? Have you ever had one before? All right. So just imagine it and see the yellow, and then just imagine just pulling back the skin of this lemon, right? And you're seeing the white part coming out, and you're noticing all of the moisture spraying out, right? And it's like, and you can smell the lemon. I mean, you can smell that fresh lemon smell. And just take a little piece of that lemon out and stick it in your mouth. Now notice what your mouth has just done, right? So what was that experience like for you? What happened in your mouth when you imagined putting that lemon in your mouth?
As if it's actually really coming there.
Yeah. So most people, the salivary glands will kick in. And how interesting it is that your body is a willing participant in this whole imaginative process. So if you can imagine it, your body doesn't know the difference between what is imagined and what is real. If you can put this state of being within your body, if you can imagine, putting your focus on your body, sometimes that frees your mind up to be able to work on different things. And so there's two parts of our brain that we can speak to. We can speak to the part that's busy trying to work out all the problems and the math and the words and understanding. But there's a part of us, just like that part that allowed your salivary glands to kick in, that is this automatic behavior that's not even under our control. And if you speak to that part of your body, you can find out, okay, what's going to bring you calm? What's going to bring you insight? What's going to solve that problem that is there? And sometimes it works on it in the background. Have you ever had an idea that just popped into your mind, and it's like, where did this come from? But it's the exact thing that you needed at the exact time.
Yeah. I would like you to spend some time there. Where are those ideas really coming from? And how are we supposed to tap into them, to leverage them? That is the right word for it.
So how are we to read it? Is that what you said?
No. I mean, those ideas, those sudden ideas that sometimes pop into our mind that perhaps, okay, I understand what you're saying now, because it has happened to me that maybe you are trying to resolve a problem. This happened to me more when I was in the secondary school. I still remember that maybe I'm working out something, I can't find a solution. Usually this will be in the evening. Maybe I'm reading, I don't get exactly what is the message, or I'm trying to solve a math problem. What I will do, I will make sure this is the last thing I do before I sleep. And I will go to bed and sleep. In my mind, it will be work out. When I wake up, I will find a solution. So I'm trying to say, how do you get to that point? Because even me now, I begin to understand that there is this possibility. So I leverage it at the point in many occasions. But I'm not an expert in hypnosis or expert in this deep psychological thought. So how do you tap into that? How do you leverage that even more by those people who understand it, or who should understand it?
So we have the two hemispheres of our brain, and one of the definitions of hypnosis, and there's some people say one thing and some people say another, but in the past, many people would say, okay, that your brain waves would kind of indicate when you entered into this hypnosis state, and they called it the theta brainwave state. And what's interesting is this is the state that we drop through, because our brain shifts frequencies as we go through sleep. And theta is one of those phases that we go through before we enter into the REM sleep. So as you're falling into sleep, you are entering that theta brainwave state, which is similar to trance. And when you're waking up, you're doing the same thing. So you're coming back through that. And one of the things that's interesting is, like, if you've had a very vivid dream, sometimes your brain does not know the distinction between what was reality and what was dream. It's like this momentary period of like, what just happened and what's going on. And that is kind of that definitive trance state. It's being in that place. So what I think you tapped into is, I really think you tapped into, we have the two hemispheres of our brain, and one side is busy with the logical thinking and, that very structured approach to life and to understanding. And then we have one that's very creative and very undefined. And that undefined space is the space that is open for intuitive thought. You heard about trusting your intuition. It's like the big data side of our brain. It's where all of the things that we have experienced in life are available, and we can draw on conclusions from that. But it's not as clear as this is the answer. It can feed that answer over to the other side of our brain, and then our other side of our brain can spit out that very definitive answer. But it's more of like a knowing. And what's interesting is this is part of where very successful CEOs, they draw on that larger understanding, that intuitive leadership to make decisions. They did a study, and I think of something like 80% or 85% of the CEOs studied all said that they use intuition in their decision-making process. And what that means is they went with their gut feel. They made a decision. Doesn't mean it was always right. It just means that they made a decision and moved forward, and then they learned from that. And so if we're talking about intuitive thought and what you just said, if you have a problem, you can't figure it out, sometimes it doesn't do any bit of good to run in the circular pattern of trying to understand something that is not making sense. But if you step away from the problem, right? If you redefine the problem, or if you sleep on it, that used to be the phrase Grandma used to say, is sleep on it, and then when you wake up, maybe have an answer. But if you can redefine the problem and then step away from it, sometimes an answer will come to you. So what you experienced, I think, is a wonderful way. And what I really liked about what you said is that you practiced it, right? You did it over and over again, and you got better at that. And that's something that is of real value, because we can develop these skills.
Actually, that is where I wanted to go also, in whether these skills are just natural for us, or do we have to develop them to? Because sometimes I believe that everything that we really need is already in front of us, but that thing in front of you is not even going to help you until you really decide that it's going to help you, that you are going to tap into it. Okay, I've interviewed a lot of people, so I've happened to learn from a lot of people. So what Aspire was telling me, that everything that can be is already is, but is in a potential sense. It is you that is going to transform them from their potential state to their real state, so that you don't have a limit. The limit that you have is the one that you set. If you don't take any action, it's going to be the way it is. But if you take action, you are troubling the water, then there's going to be the consequence of your troubling the water. That is the manifestation. But if you don't do anything, that is still fine. Nature is still fine with that. So how do we learn this so that we can use it? Because it is power, but that power is useless until we can learn how to use it. Help me, please.
So I really can't say anything better than what you just said. But what people do not realize is that we create, right? What we think about, and what in the small actions that we take, they do. Each one of them creates that ripple. Each one of them has that effect of creating our reality, of creating our experience. And so, with every thought being part of that tapestry, because thought is the first step of action. If we're thinking thoughts that are negative, and so many people have negative thoughts, it's going to move forward and create, in a way, a negative outcome. There can be 1,000 reasons why something won't work, with only one reason why it will, but there's still a reason that it will work. And if we can find that one reason, then we're successful in that. But if we stick to the 1,000 reasons why not, we'll succeed in that as well, and we will fail, or it won't work, right? So we're going to succeed either way.
I love that. It looked like the saying that He who believes that he can do it and he who believes that he cannot do it is right anyway. You are right in both ways.
That's right. Yes.
Thank you so much for that sharing, Steve. All right, now, how do we take this into storytelling? How do we leverage the power of hypnosis in storytelling? Share with me on that.
So there's a couple things that I find interesting about storytelling, and one, it's this base communication that we've had our entire, the entire existence of humanity. We conveyed information through the oral tradition, and then the stories got written down, and we carried that on through written word. And now we've got technology that can scan all of the literature that we have and extract some common truths. And I think this is an amazing experience. So with storytelling, it's about communication. We're trying to convey to each other something that is true, something that is valuable, or something that's beautiful. There are warnings that are there. There's different guides in life, but the stories are there to captivate our attention and to carry us forward with another bit of information. When we enter hypnosis, what's interesting is it suspends our resistance to disbelief, right? And it goes back to this idea that if you believe that you can, then you will. So as you're telling the stories through hypnosis, it's an indirect way, because like if you're telling somebody that you need to do this, they may resist that. They may not want to participate in that journey. They may have every reason why they're unhappy or upset or failing at their job. But if you tell a story about somebody that, they were really unhappy at their job or unhappy in their relationship, and they went out and they were at the grocery store and they just realized that they saw somebody smile and they realized, wow, that smile is really the magic of life, and that I can smile too. And once you realize that you can do the very thing that you've been seeking in the world, right? Feeling good about yourself, doing something of value, of importance, connecting with other people, creating community or family. The moment you realize that you can create that yourself, then this person went away and everything changed for them. Their relationship got better, and sometimes it changes. But if you tell a story like that and it comes out and it has a difference, it can inspire somebody else to think of the possibility that something can be different for them. And that's what the story does. It allows a way for the brain to retrieve information and with choice, you can believe it or not believe it at your choice. And that's the beauty of story, is that it gives that power back to the person. You don't need to believe it. You don't have to do it, but it's one possibility that you can consider. And even more interesting is that it may not be exactly the way of that story, but you might do something similar, or it's just the possibility that something can be different is really powerful.
Something can be different, that powerful. Now, are there some reasons why this story works? Because now, in the classes, in our storytelling, we keep on hammering the idea that story works because we know that it is true, that it really does work. But somebody might be curious, why do story work in our life, in what we do? Because now we see story be used in any area, from religion to politics to economy to science. Any time you need to talk to the human being, story always is employed all the time. So why does it work?
So I could ask you that question, because you're the expert in storytelling for business, and I would just ask you that question. So when you're looking at this, storytelling works because we allow it in. We allow it to be something that we're interested in. We hear it. And even if we disbelieve it, or even if we put up resistance, we don't put up as much resistance as if someone says, you need to do this, right? So like if you're telling somebody your story, you're connecting to them on a human level, right? So all of a sudden it creates this familiarity. It allows you to get to know somebody. But the moment that then you go past that story and realize, okay, this person succeeded. Well, if someone else wants to succeed in that area, if they want to succeed in business, or if they want to have a certain outcome, they're going to start paying more attention to the story because it just caught their attention, it just caught their interest. And now you've got a story that is carrying somebody on this journey, right? Because every story has this period where there's struggle, right? There's it's the hero's journey. I don't know if you've ever gone through that, but there's always resistance, and then eventually there's an epiphany, and then the person comes out, and then now they're full of knowledge, and what they do is they share that knowledge with somebody else. And so the stories are the way that you can take somebody through this hero's journey of having them be in this place of challenge, of not being appreciated or struggle. And it's every step along the way to get them to the point where then they can be the hero then themselves. Because the person that starts off in the story is always the person that's being mistreated or less than. And part of this story is the realization that they are the hero, and that they can change not only their life, but they change the lives of many others.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because we're all in it together. We're all together in it. All right. Now, another thing that I'm also sort of curious about looking at storytelling and hypnosis is the story that we tell ourselves. A while ago, we were saying that if you believe that you can do it, you are right. But if you believe that you cannot do it, you are equally right. With me, you are at the driver's seat. Choose whichever way you want to go. So, how could we use storytelling to change the story we tell ourselves, whether we want to go right or left?
This is a little bit of a nuanced one, because many people use affirmations, right? They try to change the story with affirmations, but I think that you need to believe this. You need to tap into the subconscious belief that you are good enough, and part of that is recognizing, what it is that makes you happy, what it is that puts you into this place of joy, of connection, and practicing that skill. It's if you're going through a difficult time in life, it's hard because it's hard to connect to those happy memories. It's hard to connect to those happy experiences, but they are there. They're just hidden because when you're feeling a certain way, it blocks the access to those. But if you can slowly over time, move that needle from bad to, better to great, or to good and then great, then you can shift it. And so the story that I think that we really need to focus upon is that we're constantly evolving, and it's never too late, right? Sometimes we think that, oh my gosh, we're trapped into this space, but so many people have picked up and done amazing things later in life. The story that we need to tell ourselves is, don't compare ourselves to anybody else, right? Compare ourselves to who we were yesterday. And remember, we didn't always know how to do what we loved. There's things that we think each of us can think of that we love to do. Some people like to walk, they like to hike, they like to, do crafts. Some people like to be out in nature, and maybe they're on the water or in the forest, on the beach. Whatever it is that you love, really love, there's something about that you had to learn. You weren't always able to do that. And if you can tap into this ability that you had to learn to do what it is that you loved, then you'll be able to tap into something that you can do that will make you better. And so there might be a problem that you have. There's something about what you learned, about what you love, that will help you solve that problem, right? It might be resilience or patience. It might be understanding, communication. It might just be strength. Something will come to you, and it's tapping into that energy. So the stories that we tell ourselves are much the same way. It's realizing that we have our own story, but rather than focusing on the story of where we were weak or where we failed, let's focus on the story of where we achieved something that we liked or something that we loved. If we can focus on that story, even if it's a specific moment, that story will give us the power and inspiration to solve all the other problems.
That's powerful. I love that. I so much love that. Now, I'm looking back to the story that you were sharing before of your personal experience, when you were going through a relationship that you were not particularly happy about. Then, of course, you managed to come out of that. But in your story, you said something to the effect that I think you realized that it was about the story that you were telling yourself. So you have to you have to change that at a point. So
Yeah.
actually, where I want to go there is, how do we know that maybe the image that we are feeding back into our brain is not the reality, it's not right? Because if we know immediately, we will stop immediately. But sometimes we see now that we remain in that loop for a very long time until we realize. So tell me about that eureka moment that you realize that this is not the right thing, then you change so that other people might learn also from your experience. Please share with me.
And that's a difficult one because it's difficult in the sense that it's a choice. And sometimes we struggle with that because there's life is not just black or white decisions because if you're in a toxic relationship or in a toxic workplace, then if you leave that, then now you got to deal with, okay, what am I going to do for a living, right? What now? I got to go through this whole process of rebuilding, of getting a new job, of going through the interviews. What if the next place is worse, right? What if it's not all bad? And the same thing's true with relationships. If we're in relationships, you've got your security of knowing what is, but you don't know what's out there. You don't know what's different. You may have kids involved. You may have definitions of parent, of child, all of these different things that are involved with that. It comes down to you. The first thing that we do is we make a choice and we say, you know what, this is how I want to be. And part of this is it ties into your emotional experience. It's understanding what it is that you want to feel like. And I do believe that the basis of this is what we want to feel like as a person is we want to feel valued, right? We want to have this sense of inherent value. We want to feel safe and secure. We want to not have this threat on the external coming at us. And we want to feel like we have a little bit of power, like we have a little bit of contribution and that we're giving something back. So if we can tap into that space, then we can start making those decisions. Like it's like when you talked about sleeping on it. If we can get into that space where we can be within that place of security, then we're not acting in a fear response because our fear responses are limited. But that intuitive response is looking at the bigger picture, right? And what's interesting is often the people that will create the fear, right? The toxic people, they're using that fear to manipulate you. And they also use other things like your need for love, or your need to be kind, or your need not to offend somebody. They will use those needs to manipulate you into a certain response. And the way that you notice this is it creates tension. It creates this separation between your authentic self of being secure, of feeling good about yourself, and it creates this dynamic of tension between, okay, now you have to respond to try to alleviate this tension. And in many cases, we can simply just drop back into this place of peace, this place of security, this place of value, and allow that other thing to be over there on the side. If we can do that, then we're not being manipulated. And when we're not manipulated, you can realize that maybe there's a different possibility or a different answer than what you've been doing.
All right, now if we were to transfer that situation, that scenario that you described, which is it can be in a romantic relationship or a relationship between a boyfriend and a girlfriend, a husband and wife, if we shift it to a professional environment, like in business or maybe in a workplace environment, would it play out the same way, or do we maybe need other dynamics to be able to understand when we should call the shot? When we should say these are the rules. You don't cross this line. If you cross that, then I'm going to go. Or even when we are entering into those relationships, is it important that we have our rules set out in that this is my line. You don't cross that. If you cross that, I'm out. What do you have to say about that in terms of the type of rapport we're able to have with people?
So, there's different types of people, and my friend Ken Caputo talks about he's a successful in business, but he's also run some dojos, and he's professional athlete. And using the martial arts training, he talks about that there's different types of personalities. So one of them is he calls it the stork mindset, the one that's very careful and looks at all the details and every little bit of what could go wrong. And he goes, and that's a valid mindset, right? They don't jump into anything quickly. They're very resistant, and they look for all the problems. But there's also the tiger mindset. The tiger mindset will just dive right in, just whatever the problem, we'll just deal with it as they come up. And if the stork and the tiger are in the same space, it's very difficult for both of them, right? Because they do not like that interaction, because one looks at the other one like, we need to do, the tiger says we need to do this, let's move forward, and the stork says, no, we can't move forward until we understand this and this and this, and that may go wrong. And so they're at odds, and that's just on a functional level. But when we start getting into the emotional level, there can be some emotional dynamics where people feel like they're being attacked, or they're under threat, and that gets a little bit more interesting, and it's a little bit more of a challenge. Because if someone is highly in the emotional frame of making decisions, and someone else is in the very cognitive, this is the way that it's done, and they've grown up where that they've succeeded through having things pointed out, and very critical environment. I know high technical leaders that they're leading huge corporations, and that is what they grew up with. Their families, if they didn't get the A, their families would criticize them and say that you failed. If they weren't at the first of their class in college, then why did they even go to college? And so they always had to perform, and that's probably why they're at the level that they are in industry, is because unless you're at the top, you're nothing. And so there are those that are out there, and there's also those that are out there that are in a place where they really don't belong. And the only way that they can have the light shown on them that they're an imposter is to point out your flaws. And many times there's a toxic person will slide into an organization. They don't last long. They only last about 2 years, but they leave this wake of destruction behind them. And it's having the resilience to know, okay, do I want to stay, or do I want to ride this out, right? It's like, how do I manage and deal with that? So the biggest thing is, rather than suffering by yourself, it's following the processes that can just help you, create structure and environment in that. But there's a self-awareness that needs to come into this, because not everybody's the same. One personality may trigger another, and there's great growth in being triggered, because if we know what triggers us, and we can understand that self-awareness of realizing that our response is 100% under our control in our domain. If we can manage that response, then we can free ourselves from being under the control of that belief or response. If it's something that we believe to be true, then we can draw a boundary, and we can say, okay, this is a boundary that I'm going to get upset if you cross it. I choose willingly to set that boundary. But so often we'll have adopted this boundary or belief in, and it won't even be valid. It won't be something that we truly believe ourselves. We've just adopted in our subconscious, evolution of life, and we can get rid of it. If it's something that we don't believe to be true, and it causes us stress, well, we just get rid of it, and then now we don't have any stress anymore. So the idea is, in the workplace environment, it's a little bit more difficult because we've got broader ranges of people. It's finding out, okay, how can this difference be used for my advantage? Like, if it's triggering to me, it's kind of going within and not worrying about what they did, but understanding, okay, what can I learn from this? What positive understanding can I take away from this? And is it a way that I can grow? And some things will be your subconscious will recognize it as a constant level of attack because it's inconsistent. Sometimes it's very directed and petty, but it's having that strength to say, you know what, this is the way that it's opening up that communication and saying, this is the way that I feel, or this is the way that I'm operating when this happens. And if you can get clarity on that, most conscientious people will respect that. The ones that don't, it's good to know that too.
Thank you for that. All right. Now, when you were talking before, you made mention of intuitive thought leadership. And I think it sort of relates to what we're talking about here now, because when you're a leader, you are dealing with a lot of people. Not everybody is like you, but you are a leader because you are leading the organization to somewhere So you want everybody to follow you. So with me, you are going to be a different kind of person now. So when you are dealing with a dynamic situation like that, sometimes very fluid, what does the role of your intuitive thought have to play there, and how can you leverage that to be a better leader of a people?
So a lot of times, like when you're creating an organization, it's about getting the people to follow along with you, to getting the people to believe in the vision that you have, and the idea that you have, and and many times it's about having them believe in themselves. So it's like as you're moving along, not only are you carrying along the company, but you're trying to develop leaders behind you as you go, and and most people want to be followers because it's a lot of work being a leader. Everyone says they want to be a leader, but there's a tremendous amount of effort and expenditure, and you have to have a very crystal clear vision of what it is that you want to do and what do you want to accomplish. And if you have that, then all of a sudden that vision, that there'll be something bigger than you that will carry you forward, and that's wonderful, because that then can be transferred to each one of the people that's in your team. And there will be people that will come along. I talk about energy, so this is part of the openness. We've got the personality traits. So I'm on a scale where I bring in more of that intuitive, experience into life, and it's about, for myself, it's about noticing the dynamic or the energy that people bring in, because some people will bring in fear, some people will bring in doubt. You've got to squash that in the beginning, because when you're just building something up and you're trying to get people to believe in themselves, you don't want somebody coming along and sabotaging that. And there will be people that will do that. And I don't know why they do it. And you can see that there's wounding. Like if you look at their life, there's been wounding in their life. They're seeking significance. There's all of these things that are going on in the background. But the thing is there will be people with you that are less seasoned. And it's, how do you instill within them the belief in themselves and allow them to carry forward? So you've got to be careful with that energy. So the intuitive thought, I think, with leadership is it's paying attention to what it is that you notice, right? If you notice something about a person, trusting your gut, trust your gut about the person, trust who you bring in, because in the very beginning, it's about the team that you create. It's not about you so much. It's about who you can get in this core team. And if you bring in the wrong people in the beginning, it just won't last, because 2 or 3 years, it'll be gone.
Thank you for that. All right, now still within the professional environment, or say maybe in the business environment or in the workplace, have you ever maybe met somebody who were having some challenges in rapporting with people, or maybe going along, and you have suggested maybe the use of storytelling and hypnosis to be able to get along better? Or if not, what kind of suggestion would you give to somebody to have a better relationship in a workplace environment using storytelling and hypnosis?
Well, I would start with their own story, that they're not a good storyteller. And how often, and it's funny, because that is the very story that since we use storytelling and hypnosis, that's a story that many psychotherapists, many coaches, many hypnotists, they tell themselves that I'm not a good storyteller. And how interesting would it be to find a different story that we could learn. So this is the whole hero's journey. So you start off as a person that's not a good communicator, or not a good at this or that, and somewhere along the way you learn to do something better. So if that person wanted to communicate about something that they love to do, whether it be a sports team, whether it be some event that happened, whether it be a success in business or a success with the family or their kid or whatever it might be, they will be able to tell you that story without any problem at all, right? So if what's the block, and that's what it comes down to. It's what's blocking you from having that communication, and this is where a little bit of self-awareness comes in. It's realizing that if you're a sensitive person, if you're an introvert, it's opening up that avenue and finding out, okay, how can you have this conversation in a way that's beneficial, right? How can you move those blockages off to the side and have a real authentic conversation? And the biggest thing is realizing that it's not personal, right? This is not about you or the other person. It's about, all right, they're expressing something. And many times people will use emotional language that doesn't even match really what's going on. I had a very effective, business person that would come in, and their second, right, the VP would just throw out all this negative talk. I mean, just yelling and screaming at everybody out in the bullpen, and it just caused all of this chaos within productivity, within people's attitudes, within their sense of security. And my friend said, pulled the VP and said, if you're going to yell at anybody, come in and yell at me. And it goes, she did. She just laid it all out. It was like, it was like he felt a little singed when she was done. But in the end, it was better, right? It changed that dynamic. So for somebody that's struggling with communication, you know, the first thing is realize that it's a skill, and you can get better at this by practice. So even being uncomfortable, that's the best place to be. So if you're in that place of communication and you're not feeling comfortable about it, great, because that's how you grow. And anything that you do in that space of discomfort and getting better at it, then you learn from that. So the biggest thing that I found with communication is just listening to what somebody says. Right. And there's some skills you can learn there, which would be empathic communication. So it's reflecting back what you hear. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them. It doesn't mean you have to solve the problem. You just simply reflect back what you've heard. And if you do that, sometimes people feel heard.
That is why storytelling works, because you pay attention to the people. And that is why it's always good to be effective all the time, if it's used correctly, of course. Because there are people that who come there all the time. They never pay attention to who is listening to them. That is not communication. Anyway, there's something that I like a lot when you were talking before also. I think you call it emotional triggers. Now, this is my curiosity. How do we even know what are emotional triggers? Because if we don't know now, we will just step on the wire. They will just keep on rolling. We'll never stop, no? Because if we know, that is when we can leverage it, no? So share with me, how do we know which are our emotional triggers?
So we've got them both on the positive and negative, right? There's some things that bring us immense joy, and we're not going to challenge those because we like that. So it's only the negatives ones that we work on, because they bring us a feeling that we don't like. And that's simply it. It's noticing when you feel a way that you don't like to feel. And if you notice that, then you can start taking steps towards something different that can have a different outcome. And this is what I'm trying to get across to people. If you only get one thing from this discussion today, it's that we have complete control of our internal state of being, of our internal emotional state, and we can control that over time. And there'll be things that will come along that will upset that stability, that place of peace. But what will happen is, with emotional regulation, you'll just come back. So it's like you'll come very, very quickly come back to that state of peace, rather than being in this state of chaos or the state of anger or the state of upset or sadness for a day or a week or a month, right? The longer that we're in this place of fear, the longer that we'll be in a place of anxiety, a place of stress. And then from stress, we come into this place of anxiety. So if anxiety is not taken care of, it'll turn into burnout. So we have all of these different things that go along, but the thing, it starts with how we are internally, and we can control that state, and we control it with where we place our attention. So if we're focusing on the things that are causing us stress, then we will be stressful. But we can also focus on the things that can bring us peace. And sometimes we can go to that place of peace, and then we can actually look at the same problem and solve the problem from a peaceful place, rather than being in a place of stress or anger or resentment or hurt.
Thank you so much for that. All right, now let's look at your business. I want to believe that you use storytelling and hypnosis in your business to better serve your audience or your client. Please share with me, how do you do that?
So for myself, it's this belief that we can have a better life. It doesn't matter where you're at in life. The story is that if you know what you want, and if you've got the strength to the ability to take a step in any direction, right? If that step is in the direction towards what you want, things will get better. And even if the step is in a direction away from that, you'll discover something new. So the idea is that it's realizing that, again, life and time is precious, and that you're deserving, each one of us is deserving of an amazing life. And there's absolute abundance out there if we just can tap into it. It's trusting yourself and realizing that not everything may be successful, but that you will learn something and that will be a success in itself. Right. So well, I asked somebody about failure one time, and it's like, because I was always curious about this term. So I asked very successful people, what is failure to you? And I was amazed at the answers, because there's one of two possibilities that exist. Either some people said, well, failure doesn't exist, because they really didn't define it as failure, because they just never gave up until they hit what was successful, or they realized it wasn't going to be successful and they moved to something that was more successful. But they always held to a dream that something could be done, and it wasn't that specific outcome, it was something bigger. So they were looking at some sort of outcome that was driving them, and they stuck to that. The other side said, you cannot succeed unless you fail. And they said that you're going to run into failures, but that's a natural part of success. And I was just so amazed by that, because they had such a different relationship with failure than the rest of the people that fall on failure and struggle and say, oh, I am a failure, I didn't do well at that. The people that succeed, they have a completely different definition of that word, and they embrace it, and they say, you know what, it'll happen. Let's figure it out and move on. So that was kind of the thing that was amazing to me.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that, Steve. Now, for people that are listening to you, they want to connect with you. What is the best way to reach you and maybe do business with you?
So the best way is through my website. I've got a group for coaches, and that's globalsummitevents.org. We have events on the calendar, different things that you can get involved in. And the other one is for my personal coaching. It's Steve at mybest-life.com. So if you're looking for personal coaching or personal growth, reach me there. If you're looking for community connection, reach out to me at theglobalsummitevents.org.
Beautiful. So today we talked about the power of hypnosis in storytelling, and of course how you can apply it in your business. Now, to conclude the conversation, what would be your final thought? Maybe something you wanted to say I didn't ask you, or just the way you want to conclude it. Please go.
Well, I just appreciate you, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here, and the invitation. And my invitation to anyone listening is that you deserve a better life. You deserve the best life. Find out what makes you happy. Find out what brings you joy, and do one small thing today to bring you closer to that.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. That is a good advice. Because even if you were a jet pilot, you see that to move from one end of the city to the next, you still need time. But you're going to move one step at a time, then you will eventually get there. Everything needs its own time. Thank you so much, Steven. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you too.